Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordian Glory video, and today guys I'm going to be doing another tournament after action report video, but it's going to be slightly different this time as I went to my first team tournament of 9th edition. Used to go to loads of team tournaments back in the day. Actually one of my preferred ways of playing, because you go with a bunch of mates, you're all playing together. Even if your game doesn't go so well, your team can still win its round if they do well. So it's just a really fun social way of playing 40k. Now, those of you who are unfamiliar with the format of these videos, what I do is I go through, I'll give a bit of an introduction of the event, an overview of how it ran, and if there are any specialities or intricacies of this particular event, and then I'll quickly go through my list. I'm not going to spend too much time on the list in this video. I have talked about this particular Imperial Guard list quite a few times, so very quick overview. If you want to have a full breakdown of the list, there will be a link at the end of this video and you can go and see the full breakdown there. And then I'll do my game by game sort of overview and a bit of a breakdown on any interesting moments that happened in them. But yeah, so that's the format of the video. Let's dive straight into it. So, as always, I'd like to start off this video by saying a massive thank you to the tournament organisers for hosting the event and putting it all together. There had been some troubles leading up to the event with Best Coast pairings of the app being a bit funny, but fortunately that all got sorted out in the end by the tournament organisers and some players who were a bit more experienced with the app, and when it actually came to the day, everything ran really smoothly. So I want to say a massive thank you to the tournament organisers and the hosts, which was Just Play, which is a wargaming shop which is in Liverpool, and it's a really good wargaming shop. It's been around for quite a while now, and they've got a great shop, loads of tables, they've got an upstairs and a downstairs, and plenty of space for them to be able to host the event, and also their regulars were able to come in and play some of their games as well. I think I saw a couple of people play a cheeky game of Blood Bowl whilst the event was going on. So really good place. They serve food, they serve drinks, they've got a really extensive shop. The shop doesn't just have models in, it's got loads of hobbying things in. They have a full huge paint rack of Vallejo paints, which I thought was really good, because I'm starting to get into Vallejo paints a bit more. Won't go down that route just yet, but basically I'm getting a bit sick of my GW paints drying out every 5 seconds. Anyway, like I said, massive thank you to all of them, and like I said, it was a really well run event. So what I want to talk about now is how the team tournament format kind of worked. So there were 6 teams and there were 4 people on each team. It was a 1-day event and you would play 3 games in that day. So now, because it's a team tournament, I want to go through some of the pairings. Obviously it's a bit different. So you had the teams that got paired up against each other, and how that worked was very simple. First round was randomised, and then after that winners played winners, losers played losers. And if there were any ties, let's say 2 teams both had 2 wins and 2 losses out of their 4 players, then they'd look at total battle points and use that as from all 4 games that had been played in that round for those teams, and use that as the tiebreaker, essentially. Now, the way the players were placed off against each other within those rounds was quite interesting. It's a little difficult to explain, but try and bear with me. So each captain had 4 cards in their hand, and each one of those cards had the name and the army of that player on them. Okay, and then each captain first places 1 card face down, and then they reveal it, and that is what's called the first defender. And then the captain will look at what has been placed down by the opposing team and go, okay, out of the 3 remaining cards in my hand, out of the 3 remaining players I have at my disposal, who would be good at taking on that first defender card the opponent's put down? Right, I'll pick 2 more cards and I'll place those next 2 face down. And both captains do that, and when that's done, they reveal those next 2 cards. And then each captain will pick out of those 2 cards that have, of the second wave that have been put down, which one of those players is going to face off against the first card was put down by the opposing team, the defender card. So then those 2 pair up against each other. So then what you have left on the board is 1 of the cards that was placed down in the second wave, and you've got the 1 card that's in each captain's hand, and they then face off against each other. So that's how it works. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a fairly standard team format. If anyone has been to a team talk before, you'll be familiar with that. And essentially, it allows the captains to try and get favourable matchups, but there's also a little bit of mind games in it, because you don't know what that last pairing could be. You don't know what the last pairing is going to end up being, and it could be that last pairing could be an unfavourable matchup. But it's the job of the team captain to try and make sure that he gets the best matchups and the best tables for his team. Now, the reason I mentioned the best tables is there were obviously four tables available for each in each round for the two opposing teams. Two of them had heavy terrain and two of them had light terrain. That was done on purpose. Each team captain then rolls off to see who picks the first table, rolls a dice, and whoever wins gets to pick the first table and the last table, and whoever loses gets to pick the two middle tables. So that's really important, because if you've got an army that's a really assault-based army, and it might be facing off a bit of a gun line, you want to make sure that you win that roll-off, so you can put that assault-based army on one of those heavy terrain tables, so it won't just get gun-lined off the board. Now, I want to say a massive thank you to my team captain, which is Stu. And I've known Stu for a very, very long time, and he's been the team captain for most team events that I've been to. Whenever I've had a go at team captain, I always seem to mess up the pairing system. So I'm just like, you know what, let someone else who's got a bit more experience doing it now. I just want to say a massive thanks to Stu, because not only was he a fantastic captain, he also did a really good job of making sure that everyone could get as best as possible, the best pairings and the best tables that they could do, and it makes such a difference. It makes such a difference when you get a good table and a good pairing. It really helps you win one of those games for your team. You tend to find there's always going to be sort of one bad matchup that you end up getting, on the team where no one's really happy with it. And sometimes, if you're kind of clever about the way you do your teams, our team was fairly casual. We just turned up with what armies we liked, and we just played what we could play. But some teams can be very clever about what's going into the team makeup, because if you've got a player who can just say and just be mentally okay with the fact, like, look, I will just face the worst stuff every single time. I'll be the guy that goes under the bus. That's fine, and I will build for that. Then that can be a really strong asset to have in your team. So think about it. If you've got a player who's just got who will never be tabled, but will always score like consistently really high in a game. Might not win every game, but he's going to get lots and lots of battle points. That's really important, because if you've got a player like that on your team, it means that if there's any ties, you're likely to win the tie. And when it gets to the end of the tournament, if you've won most of your games and you're in contention for winning the event, then you might win it just by the fact that even though this guy lost all three of his games, your team overall won all their games, and this guy just scored loads and loads of points. It's what I used to do with my pure infantry back in the day. I knew I couldn't necessarily win a lot of my games back in like 7th edition, but I could score highly every single time. And also, when you're coming across like Death Star armies that actually struggle to deal with hordes, it's a really good thing just to have a player who's got 300 guardsmen who will clog up the objectives and make not only themselves score fairly highly, they'll cause the opposing player to score fairly low. And that's really, really important. Anyway, that's enough of the team format, the tournament format. Let's now get into the list very quickly, and then we'll smash through the games. So, quick overview of the list. Many of you will be familiar with this list if you've been following this channel for some time. If you want the full in-depth breakdown, like I said, there'll be a link at the end of this video to the full breakdown. Now, this list consists of 5 Taurox Primes. Each Taurox Prime has a Taurox Gatling Cannon and double hotshot volley gun. Each one of these bad boys is putting out 28 shots at a 24-inch range. The Gatling Cannon is strength 4, AP -1, fantastic horde clearance. And the volley guns are strength 4, AP -3, which is again not only good horde clearance, but also good for smacking Space Marines onto their ass, which is just always something you want to be aiming for. If you can aim to beat Space Marines, you'll have a good shot at any tournament. So I've got 5 of those bad boys, and they are there to put out 140 shots a turn. That's what they're there to do, and they are there for my volume of fire. Now, the reason they do the volume of fire is because the infantry brings the bunker busting, the tank busting, the monster slaying equipment. I have 7 squads of Tempestor Scions. Each one of these squads has got a plasma pistol on the sergeant, a chainsword on the sergeant, and double plasma gun on the guys, and there's 2 riflemen in each squad. I have a further 3 squads of Tempestor Scions. Each one of these are armed with a plasma pistol, chainsword sergeant, and a double melter gun squad and 2 riflemen in there as well. I then have 2 bare bones 5-man Tempestor Scion squads, and they just have a free plasma pistol on each sergeant. Yes, free plasma pistol. It's still free. It's not been fixed yet. It's been over a year now, I feel, and we still get free plasma pistols on our Scion squads. I'm still going to abuse it. I also have 3 command squads. Each one of these command squads, each one of these command squads is maxed out with special weapons, and 2 of them I've got 4 melter guns in each. So that's 8 melter guns in 8 guys. That's fantastic. And I've got 4 plasma guns in the last one as well. In total, I have got, I believe, 14 melter guns in this army, and then I've got on top of that 18 plasma guns, and then I've also got 12 plasma pistols. So I have, if you add all that up, it's like 44 special weapons or something like that. Then you start adding the volley guns and the torches. It's a lot of special weapons. It's a lot of special weapons, and it's a lot of guys as well. Now I also have 3 officers, 3 Tempestor Primes. Each one of those has got a command rod, which allows them to do 2 orders each. One of them has got the Auto Tactical Reliquary of Tiberius, which allows them to do an extra order on a 2+. One of them has got no upgrades, and one of them has got my extra Warlord trait from Progeny of Conflict and my extra Relic. And he has got the standard Lambden Lions loadout. He's got the Keys to the Army Warlord trait, which means everyone within 6 inches can reroll 1s to hit in the shooting for shooting. And he's also got a 6-inch bubble shield, the Refractor shield generator, which means everyone within 6 inches gets a 5+ invulnerable save. I then have a Commissar as my final HQ choice that I need to fill out the 2 battalions, because I take this into 2 battalions, and that allows me to take multiple 5-man squads. And the Lord Commissar is my actual Warlord, and he has got the Warlord trait Master of Command, and I just have that. Many people will say that's not a good Warlord trait. Those people are wrong. I do not have platoon commanders in this army. I need as many orders as I can get my hands on. And this guy allows me to not only do an extra order, but allows me to spread those orders out a little bit more and give me more tactical flexibility. And I cannot tell you, every single game, I value that Lord Commissar for the fact that he lets me spread my orders out. He is probably my second best HQ choice just for that little toolbox functionality he brings me. The first one being, the Refractor shield generator guy and the reroll 1s guy. He's just key. I then have an Inquisitor who is there just to do some stuff in the psychic phase. I call him the double smite Inquisitor. That term sometimes confuses people. When I say double smite, I basically upgrade him in a way so that he can do smite. And there's also an Inquisition special power called Castigation, which allows you on a warp charge of 6 to get another sort of smite off, except for it's targeted and you have to beat the enemy's leadership on 3d6. Interesting fact, I'm going to get this out of the way now. This Inquisitor, basically, it's the first tournament where he completely whiffed every single game. He is meant to do an average of 4 mortal wounds a turn. In my games in this tournament, one of which was against Necrons, who don't have any psychic defense. Out of all the games, he did about 4 mortal wounds across 15 psychic phases. That's it. He just failed. So normally he's really, really reliable, but sometimes, the dice don't favour you. And then I have a priest who gives everyone +1 attack, because we've got the old school priest. And speaking of old school things, I've got my 9 crusaders, who are always a fantastic choice. These guys give me a little bit of combat potential. Each one's got a storm shield, each one's got a power sword, they've got 2 attacks base. When they're with the priest, they've got 3 attacks. And because they have the Zealot special rule, they can get full rerolls to hit in the first round of combat. 27 power sword attacks from that one squad, hitting on 3s, full rerolls. Very powerful. The Crusaders didn't do too much this tournament in the ways of killing things, but they were very, very valuable for sitting on objectives and not dying, because if that Storm Shield puts them on a 3-up save, if they're on cover, they're on a 2-up save, and if you use the stratagem take cover on them, they're on a 1-up save, and it's just very, very powerful. It's very good. So yeah, they also can do some crazy things, because they've got the old school Act of Faith. It didn't really come up this tournament, unfortunately. But there we go. So that's my list. And without further ado, let's get into the tournament games, because I know that's what you guys are really here for. So my first game was against an absolutely fantastic player called Will. And it was Will's first tournament, and he was doing it right. Because he turned up to his first event with 3 Khitan Demon Engines and Mortarion, and then some other little bits of stuff for doing objectives. 4 big bads. Now, if you remember the last event I went to, I faced off against 3 Orc Mega Tanks, and that was hard enough. So now I'm facing off against 4 big, bruisey bastards, and these guys are awesome. They've got 26 wounds each. They're toughness 8. They've got a 3-up, 5-up save. Just, having an inbuilt 5-up invulnerable saves gives them great flexibility. They're demon engines, so they can regrow a wound a turn. They're Iron Warrior. Well, he took it all as Iron Warriors, so he could heal them another 3. So potentially these guys can heal 4 wounds a turn. Not all of them, but one of them. So you've got to finish him off, because if you don't, he's just going to start juicing them back up. You can put a 6-up Feel No Pain on one of them. Morty is obviously great. He comes with reduced damage by 1. He comes with a Feel No Pain. He is toughness 8. He's got a 4 invulnerable save. And all of these bad boys are moving fast, like 12 inches. Like, they are not messing around. And so this was actually quite a difficult list, because I was confident that I could kill, like 2 of them. But then I'm going to have the remaining 2 are going to fly around and do potentially some serious damage to me if I let them. So this is it's a fantastic list. It's a really cool list. And it just really set the tone for the rest of the tournament. A great player with a great list, and just very, very cinematic and very cool. It just put a big smile on my face, and I just knew the rest of this event was going to be a good one. Spoiler alert, it was fantastic. I had 3 amazing games in this event. All of them were great. Now, the mission was Retrieval Mission, which was good, 6 objectives, and it means I've got a longer chance to shoot at him because my deployment zone is a bit deeper, so I've got that ability to fall back into my deployment zone if I need to. The terrain on the table was quite light, and both players were kind of happy with that. He didn't want a heavy terrain table because it would have really restricted the movement of his Khitans, but I didn't want a heavy terrain table because I wanted the ability to be able to hide behind certain ruins that I could shoot out of, thanks to the obscuring terrain rule and the fact he's Titanic, but he couldn't shoot into. So, because those Khitans, those guns they've got, are actually quite good when you Demon Forge them up. So yeah, it was both players were kind of happy with the table. I was very happy with the mission, and yeah. So how the secondaries worked: I took Retrieve Octarius data, I took Engage on all fronts, and I took Titan Slayer because I figured I was going to have to kill these things anyway. Now my opponent took Engage on all fronts, he took Grind them down, and he also took Assassination against me because I've got 6 characters. So that was the mission, that was the secondaries, and then in terms of how both players deployed, I deployed over 24 inches away from him so he couldn't get a turn 1 charge, and in case he went first. And I also, and he just deployed everything on the line. I deployed in my my classic formation now, which is where I put the 3 Tauroxes with the Bubble Shield Commander on one flank, and I put 2 Tauroxes with the Commissar on the other flank, and they've all got all the plasma squads apart from the plasma command squad start in the Tauroxes. I found it much better to have a bit more plasma starting off on the board in case I don't get turn 1. Interestingly here though, I took advantage of one of the big ruins that you can see behind Mortarion. Even though it's quite a low wall, the overall structure was counted as obscuring, which meant he couldn't really shoot my Crusaders very much. And what I did is I put them on that bit of cover there, so they got cover and they were holding the objective, and he could only ever really draw a line of sight with one of his Khitans to them. So my Crusaders actually did no damage this game, but he did shoot his Khitans at them sort of every other turn. And every time he killed a few off, they just sat there and just regrew them. So even though I lost like 4 or 5 Crusaders over the course of the game, maybe even like 6, by the end of the game I just regrown 5, so I still had like 7 or so on the board by the end of the game. So they just sat there just holding that objective all game, which was really, really important. Now, this game was fairly straightforward. My opponent did get the turn 1, which was big for him, because it means I basically sort of get one less turn of free shooting at him. And it meant that I was going to have to play incredibly cagey. So what he did is he just pushed everything forward turn 1, but used his little things to screen out my rodding and my other deep strikers. His shooting turn 1, I was actually really impressed with shooting turn 1 because he used Demon Forge on one of his Kaitans and he actually blew up one of my Tauroxes. His remaining Kaitans only did scattered damage because there was a lot of dense terrain on the board, but that Demon Forge was really, really powerful. And that was essentially his turn 1. He just pushed all 3 Kaitans forward, which he deployed them equally across the lines. So you had one Kaitan, then Mortarion, then another Kaitan, just equally spaced out across the front line. So he could just assault me at all points. My turn 1, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be able to kill one of these Kaitans in turn 1. Okay, that's just not going to happen. But I need to be able to stop my opponent from getting 15 primary points in his turn, and also try and get it so that I'm holding 2 at the beginning of my turn, if possible. So, and I want to get some engage points as well. So I get a couple of plasma squads out, and I move them around the place so that they can so I can get engage for 2 points. I don't get into all 3 table quarters, and I'm able to hold 2 objectives, and hopefully I've got enough guys on it, so and some are out of line of sight that works out. But I still want to try and make sure that I'm away. Those 2 squads can be sacrificed, and that's fine if he charges them, but I don't want him to get charges off on my remaining assets. So I actually move a lot of stuff back. And so I had 3 Tauroxes and basically 2 plasma squads, and the Crusaders did Rod. And I had 3 Tauroxes, 4 Tauroxes, and basically 2 plasma squads that were able to fire at one of his Kaitans. And that was basically it. So they all unloaded into one of his Kaitans, and I actually did like 18 wounds to it overall. And that's pretty much thanks to the fact that I've got Vengeance for Cadia, and I slap that on a Taurox. I get 4 rerolls to hit, 4 rerolls to wound. I'm only wounding on 6s, but I've got like 20 shots. And they've only got like a 4-up save against my AP -1 on the Taurox Gatling Cannon. So that actually, the Taurox Gatling Cannons overall like chipped off quite a lot of wounds. And then I had the volley guns, which I used Gifts from Mechanicus on, which meant on the Vengeance for Cadia Taurox, which meant that even though I was looking for 6s, every 6 that went through was just a mortal wound. And I ended up doing like 3 mortal wounds with that. And it was actually really powerful. I just did that basically every turn. So I damaged one of his Kaitans. I ended up chipping off 3 wounds off Mortarion as well, just because he was really unlucky. I'll say this now, my opponent's dice were not great. Mine were steady. They weren't above average. Mine were steady. My opponent's dice, he had times when he would make all his saves, and he had times when he would make none. And it was just a bit tricky. For example, he never... 3 turns in a row, he never got off Mortarion's -1 to hit power. Didn't get it off. Just insane. I didn't even need to deny it, he just failed it. Even with like CP rerolls, he just failed it. So it was just a real shame. So that was turn 1. Now my opponent's turn 2, he comes for me, but it's all long charges and whatnot. So he damages another Taurox, he degrades it down, but not enough, because I'm able to repair it back up into its next bracket the next turn if I use Jury Rigging, if I want to. So he does some scat damage, but he doesn't actually kill a lot. He does kill... he kills 9 out of the 10 Scions that I'd put on one of those extra objectives, but he doesn't kill the last one. And I am able to use... I've got a Sergeant, so he's leadership 7, and I'm able to use... Insane Heroism from the Guard book for 1 CP to basically automatically pass that leadership check, and he just passes. So actually that's so big as well, because he failed the charge like twice with a reroll on this one guy, because I took all the ones off for shooting, so it was actually quite a long charge, like an 8 or 9 inch charge, and he failed it twice with the reroll, and that meant I got 10 points in my primary, which was nice. My turn 2 comes around, and I'm like, right, I know what I need to do. I need to kill 2 Kaitans. I need to kill 2 Kaitans. Because if I don't, they're going to be all over me. Killing 1 isn't enough. Now bear in mind, in my opponent's turn 2, I should have said he healed 4 wounds off that one that I'd done quite a lot of damage to. So instead of taking 18 wounds, I'd only taken 14 wounds, which makes my life a little bit harder. And I decide I need to go all in. I've been in this situation before when I have faced off against the Orc mega tanks. I couldn't hold anything back. It's better to overkill and guarantee killing 2 than even leaving one of these on 1 wound. It would just be a nightmare because he can start healing it up and I might not have the firepower to bring it down again. So I go all in. Okay, I've fallen back for 2 turns. He hasn't managed to get a turn 2 charge on me thanks to I've just played it very cagey. Now I burst forth. All my melter guns come down against one of the Khitan. We were talking 2 melter command squads and 2 normal Scion squads of melter, and then one of the melter squads. And pretty much all my plasma starts going into the other one, except for I had some plasma in the commissar flank, which had to go into the original one as well. So basically, there's a good amount of equal plasma and melter going into each one of these things, and it's like all of my plasma and melter. Okay, and then I've got all my Torx primes in range as well, and I am able to I'm able to move my keys to the Armoury commander, 3-1 hit commander, and conga line people to him. So he's actually covering pretty much all the firepower on these 2 Khitans. Because I just go for 2 that are on the same flank, and I've basically refused to flank at this point. I'm like, whatever. Okay, refuse flank, whatever. And I know that Mortarion is probably going to be able to get like a couple of squads next turn, but that's fine because he's already a bit damaged. And if there's only him and 1 Khitan left, and he only kills like 2 or 3 squads, then I've still got enough firepower to deal with Mortarion if I just deal with him. Okay, so my turn 2 comes around, and I put Elimination Protocol sanctioned on everyone, so they've got full rerolls to wound against vehicles and monsters, and these guys and my men just unload. It's like that scene from Aliens, like let's rock. That's what happens. And I'm not going to lie, I picked up 2 Khitans. Just picked them up, pop, pop. And I actually had enough spare firepower left over to like chip Mortarion down. So he only had like, I think it was like 8, or it was between, I think it was 9 or 10 wounds left. So Mortarion was actually in trouble as well. And to be honest, that turn 2 kind of sealed it. My opponent did have lots of little guys like scoring objectives and whatnot, but he hadn't got grinded down turn 1, and he hadn't got it grinded down turn 2 because I had done some, because I killed 2 Khitans, you see, and he didn't quite kill that one guy that I was talking about before who lived, so he didn't get grinded down for 2 turns, and he lost 2 Khitans, and Morty took half wounds basically, and that was kind of game, unfortunately. Now fair play to Will. He played it out. He was like, I'm here to play. I'm here to collect skulls. But the Khitan that I had left was kind of out on its own. And it only had 1 target, which was I'd put a Torx Prime against it so that they were both contesting an objective. And yeah, so I didn't want it to score well on primary. And so he blew up a Torx Prime and, skull cannon down some infantry. Mortarion did something similar. He went in and killed a bunch of, 2 squads of infantry. But then at my turn 3, I picked up Mortarion. But I only picked up Mortarion because actually, like, fair play, Mortarion's actually tougher than one of those Khitans. He might not have as many wounds, but he's got reduced damage, 1, and he's got fire feel no pain, which makes such a difference, and a 4 Bimbun. So I picked up Mortarion and did some chip damage on the last Khitan. And actually, I then started using my Torx Primes to go hunting against his little dudes that he'd put down. And so I actually, I ended up picking up all his little dudes in my turn, turn 3, turn 4. And so all he's got left in his turn, actually I tailed him turn 4. I picked up all his little dudes, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, and I picked up the last Khitan turn 4 as well. And yeah, that was it. And it was a pretty strong score for the Scions. I'm not going to lie. It was 94 points to the Scions to 55 for Will. So fair play to him. Like, he actually did quite well on the primary. It was a bit of a tricky situation for him because I think he realised he was going to lose on points after turn 2, and he did try and he didn't just banzai his remaining big things in. He was thinking about, right, I need to score as many points for my team. So he ended up not being as aggressive with his Mortarion and with his remaining Kaitan as he could have been. And you might think that was a mistake, but there's no guarantee. He may have got grind them down once extra. He ended up getting it in 2 turns. He may have got it in 3 if he'd gone more aggressive, but he wouldn't have scored as much primary. And he struggled on his secondaries in general, but he got a very respectable primary score. I think he got 35 on his primary, which if he'd just done the corn thing and just charge, he probably would have scored quite low on primary. And so I think whilst he wasn't as aggressive as big as he could have been, he ended up scoring more points because of it, which was good for his team. Because the end result was our team won 2 of our games, and his team won 2 of his games, and then because there was only they had 20 more points than us, and so they ended up winning the tiebreak. It was a draw, but in terms of who they faced next, they would face someone who had higher battle points. So that was a really, really good game. Really, fantastic list. Really nice to see a skew list like that. It's very unfortunate for my opponents that they keep facing me with their skew lists, and that's not an arrogant thing. What I should really rephrase that: they keep facing my list, because my list is just designed to pick up 2 big bastards in a turn. That's the firepower that it's got, and I've got Elimination Protocol sanctioned, and it's just horrific. It's just horrific having that order. It's really good, and it keeps me very competitive. But if this Kaitan list had gone into my captain's list, Stu, he couldn't have done anything to it because he's a combat White Scars list. He would have run in, done a bit of damage to them, and then just died, because those Kaitans could do 18 attacks in combat if they do their sweep attack or whatever it's called. So it was a good matchup for me on a decent board, and a strong first game for the Scions. Big thank you to Will for sticking it out, and just really, really good first game. So my next game was against Anthony and his Necrons, and he had a really solid just toolbox of a list. So he had a bit of everything. He had some Wraiths, he had some Destroyers, he had Doomsday Ark, 2 squads of Immortals, a big block of Warriors, an Overlord, a Royal Warden, and some Scarabs, and some Scorpion Destroyers, the Void Dragon, and a big block of Tomb Blades. Now, when I first saw this list, I actually picked this matchup because I thought it would be a really good matchup for my Scions. And I'll be honest, I think this should have been a good matchup for me, but there are a couple of things that made it kind of tricky, to be honest. And the thing is, I haven't played Necrons in a tournament yet. I've played them once in 9th edition, and I was using my Pure Infantry Guard, and it was the very beginning of 9th edition. So I sort of thought I knew what this list was capable of, but because I hadn't played it before, I really I misjudged it. What I can tell you guys is Necrons are tough. Necrons are really, really tough. And so what ended up happening is we both deployed, and I deployed my classic formation. Except the terrain was kind of tricky because there was a place where you could hide some of your stuff, but I couldn't do my usual where I hide 3 Tauroxes in one place and 2 Tauroxes in another. I could hide 4 Tauroxes in one place and 1 Taurox in another, and that's what I did. And I did a bit of a refused flank, and I refused the flank that Anthony ended up deploying against. So I thought this will be really good, because what I'll do is I'll smash through, because it's Scorched Earth, I'll smash through one flank, most of his army out of position, his army's quite slow, and then what I can do is, once I've smashed half his army with the majority of my army, I'll come round and deal with the rest of it. That didn't go to plan. For a couple of reasons. Firstly, so that I got first turn, and you know what? I thought getting first turn would be good, because I was like, oh, Gatling down all his Necron warriors. But it ended up not being good. Now, just before I go into turn by turn, I'll go through secondaries. I picked Engage North Front, I picked Retrieve Ties Data, and I picked No Prisoners because I figured I get more points if he reanimates his stuff and I can try and kill it again. And he picked Grind Them Down. He also picked Retrieve Octarius Data, and he picked Purge the Vermin, I believe. So it was a good, good secondaries for both teams. Now, I got first turn, and I learned the hard way about reanimation shenanigans. So I had it. So I had my Tauroxes in range of his Necrons, but not really in range of his of being charged by things like his katana and his scabs and whatnot. What my opponent did is he took some models off and then reanimated them basically round the corner, in a slightly different position, but within range of the unit. And what that meant is that he actually took me out of range of some of my Torx Primes and out of line of sight, which was actually really, really clever placement. I thought that you reanimated them where they stood, where they had died, but you don't. So fair play to my opponent for for using his army correctly, and that's what I mean about if I've not faced Necrons before, it actually makes it kind of tricky. I won't fall for that mistake again. Put it that way. So my first turn, I thought, I'll easily pick up 20 Necron Warriors, and I didn't. I did force him to spend 2 CP to keep him alive, but I didn't pick up all the 20 Necron Warriors, and that was frustrating, because he was then able to use those warriors to move and advance onto one of my objectives and deny me primary points. And that was very, very difficult. Now, his turn 1, he comes forward, and he comes forward with his Catan, and his Triarch Stalker and his Scorpec Destroyers, and I'm like, great. Do you know what? I'm just going to go in there and just clear loads of that. I'm going to have my Crusaders go forward. I'm going to have my Psyker ready to do stuff. And I'm going to take that Catan down. I'm going to take those Scorpec Destroyers down, and I'm going to clear that Triarch Stalker away, and it's just going to be great. And the problem is I'm going to be totally honest, I made a key mistake. I didn't commit enough. I really had to clear that whole area and smash through like I described. I had to do that. And I didn't bring all my reserves in. In fact, I kept 3 squads back, 3 Melter squads back. And that was a key mistake, because my opponent got a run of good luck on his saves. It happens. Fair play to him. I teased him about it. Anthony, if you're watching this video, you're a cheesy, jammy bastard, but I love you. So, what happened was I ended up putting 8 Melter Guns into his Triarch Stalker with Elimination Protocol Sanction. I figured, I've also had 4 Plasma... I also had some Plasma Guns and other stuff that would help me really finish it off. And I had 2 Taurox Primes that were in range with Scorpec Destroyers, and I figured Melter Guns can go into the Triarch, Taurox Primes can go into the Scorpex. I can use overcharge. I was in range to overcharge my weapons, so I could wound them on a decent amount. I could do mortal wounds to them. If I kill one, I could potentially, use some infantry to try and do killing fields and maybe give myself a boost. There's stuff I could do, right? And so that was the plan. And I had my Crusaders get the 2 up to move forward. So they moved 6, they moved another 6, they went 12. So right, I'll clear. And I had my Psyker ready to do mortal wounds against his Satanas, against his Catan as well. So I was like, right, I am set up. And I started shooting. And I just didn't hit. I kept rolling 2s to hit. And Ant kept making his 4-up saves because he could boost his Quantum Shield into a 4-up. So the dust settled. 8 Melter Guns had fired. And this Triarch Stalker had only taken it still had 6 wounds left. And I was like, oh, that's so frustrating. So I was like, you know what? Not ideal. I really kind of want to use these Plasma guys against the Scorpec Destroyers, but I can't. I really need that Triarch Stalker deck because it's got double heavy flame. If I don't kill it, it's going to start tying. It's got a big footprint. It's going to start. The way I've had to come out to do this, it's going to tie up so much stuff. So I put 4 Plasma guys into it. They all hit, and they nearly all wound. I'm like, great. This thing's got like 4 or 5 wounds left. You know, I'm just going to kill it. And it's like 8 4+ saves he's got to make. Oh, it had 4 wounds left. That was it. He's got to make 8 4+ saves. Only 2 of these need to go through, and he dies. And he rolls dice, and he passes every single one of them. And that right there cost me the game. That right there cost me the game. Because I then had to put my Tauroxes into killing it. I had to. Like, because the way I deployed, if you imagine what's in front of that what was in front of that Triarch Stalker was pretty much my whole army. It was just going to flame and tie up, and I had to kill it. So I ended up being like, right, I ended up killing it. And I tell you what, I think I made a mistake. I think I got a bit of tunnel vision, but it should have fucking died. I didn't get a bit of tunnel vision. And then because of what happened, I had a little wobble on the Crusaders. And I was like, you know what, I'm not going to charge Crusaders in, because I could charge, but I could only get a few in range of his Scorpec. And I made a key mistake here as well. Know your terrain rules, guys. Okay, this is my mistake. I could have fought his Scorpec Destroyers through the big L, the big foam L that you can see. I didn't know that. I thought because it was thicker that I couldn't fight through it. It's thicker than an inch. Maybe I was right, maybe I was wrong there. So it turned out that I couldn't. I was going to charge a Scorpec, but then its Catan would heroically intervene, and then I'd die. But in hindsight, I should have charged in anyway, because I would have gone first. And then at least I would have like probably killed the Scorpex, and then they wouldn't have been around next turn. What ended up happening is I didn't charge in. I had a wobble. I bottled it, and then those Scorpex were free to start messing me up. And that right there, guys, was where I lost the game. That's where I lost the game. Now what ended up happening is he then Veiled of Darkness I didn't expect to do this. His Immortals over to that flank. So then what happened was he had Tomb Blades, he had Veil of Darkness, he had Immortals, he had another squad of Immortals that were already there, and he had his whole army there. And so my whole thing of sweeping around and clearing turned out that I bounced off these Necrons badly, and then he swept through me. And so the hunter became the hunted. And super well played by, and I didn't expect him to use his veil like that. I thought he'd use it to start, you know, flanking me in another way. But that actually wouldn't have been the right move. And so yeah, that was it. That's where I lost that game, unfortunately. But like I said, I lost that game and absolutely capitalised on my mistakes. And when you get a run of luck like that, you've got to capitalise on it, and that's what he did. So he played absolutely fantastically. So big thumbs up to Ant. He ended up going 3-0 at this tournament, which is incredible. Like it's like, I can't remember if it was his 8th game of 9th or 8th tournament game, but I think it was his 8th tournament game. But you know, really, really well played. Last time he played was in 5th edition, so you know, really well played. He's been playing Necrons solidly, and I think if you, it's that old adage: if you've got a player who just knows their list inside and out, you know, it does wonders. So yeah, that's where the game was lost, unfortunately. Now, we played it out because I want to get as many points as possible, and I ended up doing all right. End final score was, I believe it was 90 points to Ant, so big win for him. But I did manage to get 60 points, even though in his turn 2, he basically cleared away my army. I kept fighting, kept getting as many points as I could. And I ended up getting like 60 points, and Ant got about 90 points. So it was a good, a good second game. Learned a lot, and I think I should have. I now know in the majority of my games that I want to. It's better to overcommit than to undercommit. It's just better. If as Scions, if I undercommit, my remaining reserves that come in won't save the day. It's as simple as that. So I learned that, and whilst it can sometimes be frustrating to overcommit, and that can sometimes cost you, I feel in this case by not overcommitting, I would have had 6 more melter guns available, guys. 6 more melter guns, 3 more plasma pistols. I could have killed I could have killed that Triarch Stalker. I could have then used my Taurox Primes and Firepower to get rid of those Scorpex. And then the Crusaders, and do damage to the Catan, do 3 wounds to it in shooting against the Catan. And then the Crusaders could have gone in against it, done another 3 wounds to it. And then I can kill it next turn. And then it would have been fine. And that's why I needed to overcommit. So, lesson learned for me. You always learn more from your failures than from your successes. And in this game, what I learned is Necrons are tough. They've got shenanigans that make them super tough, and they've got decent invuln saves. And if you don't smash them completely, you can't. No half measures against them. That's what I learned. So Necrons are tough. No half measures from the Scions. And if I've launched the Crusaders out there, it's better to go in with them than to leave them out in the open. Because whilst they did a bit of movement blocking, they all died and did nothing, and that's my fault and not their fault. So once the Crusaders are committed, it's best to commit, because they're going to die in the counter-attack anyway, because they're not Bullgrins. They're not as tough. Their damage output, they're not durable unless they're in cover on an objective and take cover as well. So lessons learned there. Fantastic game against Ant. It was his first time he'd played against Imperial Guard in a tournament, and he was like, your army is totally different to what I was expecting. He's like, last time I played Guard, they hit on 4s, they've got no damage output, and they just die in droves, and they just try and do objective stuff. And he was like, your army actually had the firepower to actually threaten me. And he was like, this is one of the first games I've played with my Necron army where I felt like I was, the firepower was there to really, really hurt me. It's just unfortunate that it just didn't play out that way. But I'd say the best way of trying to sum this game up was I lost it due to my mistakes, but Ant won it due to his generalship. Okay? And I think that's the best way of describing it. It wasn't a bad matchup. It wasn't an overpowered army versus an overpowered army or anything like that. It was just one player made some mistakes and one player played a solid game. And the winner, the deserved winner won. So well played, Ant. Fantastic game, fantastic opponent. Loads of laughs, loads of just, like I said, I had 3 fantastic games, 3 fantastic opponents. And even though I lost this one, I learned a hell of a lot. And I'm going to be a lot more confident going into Necrons next time. And I will know next time you got to put them down to keep them down. And whilst I lost my game, my team did quite well, and overall we got 2 wins and 2 losses, which meant we got another draw. So my team hasn't actually lost any of its rounds yet, and our points were quite good this time as well. So overall, my team is on 2 draws, and I'm on 1 win, 1 loss. But let's go into that third and final game, and it was a really, really good one, guys. So my last game was against Matt and his Blood Angels, and this was kind of the total opposite of the last game. See, I barely played Necrons in general, let alone at tournaments. Probably count on one hand the number of times I've actually faced Necrons since I've been doing 40k properly. And I have played against Blood Angels consistently, pretty much on average at least once a month, probably twice a month for the last 10 years. So I know what Blood Angels can do. I'm very, very familiar with them. And that was really helpful because it just meant I could focus on my strategies and my armies and not have to try and worry too much about what my opponent could do because I kind of knew it on an instinctive level. Now, Matt was another fantastic opponent. I'm really grateful that I just had 3 really, really good games. And I was also very grateful to Matt because he said that this third game was actually one of his favourite ones as well. But to be fair to him, he had 2 really hard matchups for his Blood Angels in the first 2 games. And whilst this wasn't an ideal one because I'm a very shooty army and he's a very assault orientated army, this one at least he could actually get out of his deployment zone is how he put it. So he actually really enjoyed this game as well, and I really enjoyed it. It was just a fantastic way to finish off the day. Now the mission was Sweep and Clear, which is one of my favourite missions, and that's the one where there are 5 objectives. It's table quarter deployment, and it's got the best mission-specific secondary, which is Direct Assault. If you hold that middle objective, at the end of your turn, you get 3 points. I love this because I can just move a 5-man Scion squad onto that objective every turn, obsec it because I've got great obsec, and just get 15 points every time. And that was my plan, and that's what I did. Now, I also chose Rod and Engage. I always pick those two. I am starting to think a little bit about banners, but I think I prefer Rod over banners. Rod Retrieval Darius Data. Praise be to Rod. Now, my opponent picked Engage North Front. He also picked Assassinate, and he also picked Retrieve Octarius Data. Now, the moment that he picked Assassinate, I was like, right, I'm just going to keep my characters way, way back. They don't need to be up close and personal. They can just be sitting back. And I also knew that I definitely had the firepower advantage. Matt's list had all the classic Blood Angels trimmings that you need. He had some Death Company, he had some Sanguinary Guard, he had a Smash Captain, you know, those three just great units. And they had a sprinkling of other stuff that I've found to be, you know, really good and a bit of a toolbox. So, for example, he had a little unit of Outriders that he could use to get and put pressure on me turn one. He had a unit of Blade Guard Veterans. He had the Judicar with them, which is quite good. He had a Master Librarian. Not seen someone take a Master Librarian before. Actually was quite interesting, quite a good unit. And some Infiltrators, a few other bits and bobs, but a big Redemptor Dreadnought as well. But one thing which he had was Heavy Intercessors, which really cool unit. It's a shame, unfortunately, they kind of spent the game holding the home field objective. But, you know, they did hold it the entire game. So fair play to them. That's a consistent, you know, primary score every single time. They're difficult to shift off. And when you put them behind some lines like blocking terrain, it can make them very difficult to Barney with. Now, in terms of my game plan going into this, I knew that he would be able to put the pressure on turn one, and you know, turn two, and that basically I had to play it cagey in those first two turns. I had to screen him out for any deep strikers he might have, like he had some Plasma Inceptors as well, and I figured once he's kind of in and committed, I can bring out the plasma guns, I can bring out the melters, and I can do damage to him because. Outside of his Blade Guard, he had a distinct lack of invulnerable saves. His Master Librarian could put a 5+ on people around him, but you know it's not Storm Shield spam, and my army is kind of geared to deal with Storm Shield spam, and if people don't have that, then it means that I really do have the firepower advantage. So Matt got turn one. And, you know, aggressively pushed forward. He took the middle objective. He made his Blade Guard OBSEC, which meant that if I wanted to get direct assault in my turn one, I was going to have to kill them. I couldn't just put one guy on the objective and OBSEC it away from him. Very smart move. Didn't really see, this is what I mean, talking about a toolbox. And he pushed. He infiltrated onto one objective so that he could rod with that straight away, and that's what he did. He did a Retrieve Data. And then he pushed down one flank, a squad of Assault Intercessors and his Outriders, and then he pushed down another flank, his Dreadnought, Smash Captain, Librarian, and he, with his Sanguinary Guard, I feel like he could have been a little bit more aggressive with them, but he was aware of how much I had in reserve, and he kind of wanted to use his Sanguinary Guard as a little bit of a reserve, because a lot of people will go straight in for the kill with Sangard, and sometimes that is exactly the right thing to do. Put pressure on early, you know, threat overload, totally get it. But Sanguinary Guard are different to Vanguard Veterans, which are purely a combat-capable unit. Sangard, they don't have the invuln save, but they've got shooting capability, and their bolters are always AP -1 at least. And so, and they've always got 2 shots at good range, because they're like Angelus bolt guns. So I do feel like Matt was using them to try and operate in every phase and use them as a bit of a mobile reserve. So it's an interesting use of them. I think maybe in this game he should have been a little bit more aggressive with them, but it's difficult if you throw your guys into that wall of guns. It can be difficult. So I understand why he was sort of doing it the way he was. Now, my turn one comes around, and I'm like, okay. I'm aware he's got Death Company in the sky, he's got Intercepts in the sky. I'm aware of those threats. I need to screen him out, and I need to prepare for that turn 2 punch that Blood Angels can do. So what ends up happening is I use a couple of squads to do some screening. One of those squads does direct assault for me, and the other one gets me an engage point. I've got my classic setup of he had a death ball basically and a few flanking units. That was his deployment. My classic setup: two chimeras, two Tauroxes on a flank, on the left-hand flank, moving up. With the commissar, with 3 squads, that classic, just commissars, roving sort of lone wolf brigade, and then I've got my 3 and all my character crusaders around in the sort of main part of my deployment zone on my home objective. So I move out, I screen out. So I'm like, yeah, I'll probably lose 10 or 20 guys in my next turn. Might lose one of the Tauroxes from firepower because his firepower was fairly minimal, but yeah, okay, that's fine. And then I fire away. Now in my turn 1, all I pick up is the 5 infiltrators off that objective because I'm trying to keep his primary down. And I also pick up all his Blade Guard veterans, although it does take 3 chimeras to do that. And I'm able to move and get direct assault. My Crusaders are just kind of hanging around at the back. They're screening out with the priest so that he can't just deep strike in with his units. And they get me rod turn 1. So that's sort of turn 1. Both players done a bit of damage to each other, but nothing too heavy. And then turn 2 comes along, and he brings his reserves in, and his Sanguinary Guard. This is, again, he was using them as a shooting unit, and he did push forward with them to be a bit more aggressive and to threaten me on direct, to basically be a counterattack to my next direct assault. And then he goes in, and his Death Company make it in, and they kill one of my Tauroxes from the Commissar flank, and they spell out. The Plasma Interceptors do damage to the second Taurox part of that battle group, and the Redemptor is able to gun down with its Gatling gun. It's able to gun down about one of my infantry squads, but it doesn't make its charge, unfortunately. It just doesn't make it, and his Outriders came screaming in for a charge and then failed it. It was like a 6-inch charge with a CPU roll. He just failed it. He got a 1 and a 2 and then re-rolled it and got a 1 and a 2. So that was very unlucky for him. And so what then happened is it was my turn 2. And I was like, okay, his reserves are in. He did put his Smash Captain into the sky. Or no, he put one of his Sanguinary Guardians into the sky with Upon Wings of Fire. But I was like, apart from that, he's kind of all in now. Time for me to counterattack. And so I brought everything in. And it was just a brutal turn 2. Again, I had asked my captain to put me on a light cover board because he didn't have much firepower and I had great firepower. And so turn 2 was a massacre, unfortunately. Not totally over, don't get me wrong, but I picked up his Outriders, I picked up his assault intercessors, so that was just one of the flanks clear. I cleared the centre of one of his Sanguinary Guard units, and I did pick up his Death Company as well, which means he only really had on the board at this point is one of his Sanguinary Guard units, which was in reserve. Was his Smash Captain in reserve? He had a Sanguinary Guard squad, a Plasma Interceptor squad, and some characters like the Dreadnought running around. And I had damaged Dreadnought but not killed it. So it was difficult. His turn 3 comes around and he does do good damage to me. Like, it just shows how fragile Scions are. I ended up losing another Taurox Prime, another 15-20 infantry. But that's kind of the last hurrah. And in my turn 3, I just so used to playing Blood Aliens, I just know what they can do. I just know how to counter them. So my turn 3, I actually ended up move the Crusaders out, double move them because of I get my Act of Faith off. That allows me to get to charge range of his Master Librarian, which they do go in. They kill the Master Librarian. I finish off the Dreadnought with melters. I finish off the intercept with, I had some more melter guns. I actually kept 2 squads in reserve, and because I didn't think I would kill it in one turn, the Dreadnought, but I didn't have enough orders, so I thought I can handle it rampaging for one turn. So that the Dreadnought gets picked up. The Plasma Interceptors get picked up, and yeah, really all that's left on his side of the board at this point is he's got the Smash Captain, he's got the Judicator, he's got Heavy Intercessor, he's got a couple of scattered little bits here and there. But yeah, that was it, unfortunately. And turn 3, turn 4, I pick all that up. I don't get to his heavy intercessors, to be fair to him. And so the game ends, and it's it's a big. It was, like I said, it was a quick game. To be fair, it was the last one. It was a really fun game, but I think just fundamentally my list did just hard counter his list, and the board that we were on hard countered his list as well. He didn't have a lot of places he could hide. He potentially, I think the only way he could have pulled it off is if he had just gone all in, hyper aggression, and had just done just tried to overwhelm me. But I've got layers. I'm not, my army is like an ogre. It's like an onion. It's got layers. So he could have stripped through, and if he'd done that hyper aggression, I would have just put way more screening in his face. And I still think it probably would have been a longer game. It would have gone on more sort of like turn 4, turn 5 for me to pull it back. But still, it was a really tough matchup for him. But fair play to Matt. He said it was still one of his favourite games from the event. He said he'd really struggled in his first 2 games. The opponents that he'd had got turn 1 on him, and he faced like Harlequins, for example, which just turn 1 just swamped him. He never got out of his deployment zone in his first 2 games. And in our game, it was like, yeah, I lost, and I lost a lot of models. Almost got tabled essentially, but at least I was doing something. I was pulling off strategies. I was pulling off tactics. I was trying things. I was doing mechanisms. I could see that I was actually able to feel like I played a game of 40k. And I was like, you know what, fair enough, because a lot of people, this was a tough matchup for him, and a lot of people would have been a bit annoyed by that. But fair play, he'd had 2 difficult games. He still went into his 3rd one, with a smile on his face and not salty at all. But yeah, that was the 3rd and final game. So ended up going 2-1 with the Scions. I'll definitely reckon that I'll be able to do better against Necrons next time. Learned some valuable lessons. It's better to overcommit, and just absolutely smash something rather than leave it half dead because your Scions too fragile to take that punch back. Scions have got some good matchups. We can deal with those skew lists. We can deal with Marine assault armies fairly easily. We're at this what I've learned over the last 14 competitive games with my Scions and 8 with this particular list is that Scions definitely have the firepower, and the way you kind of win your assaults, your combat, is point blank blistering firepower, not by actual combat. And I think Scions do that really well. They definitely play the meta. They're an elite army, but there's loads of them. And they can play missions. I don't think I've had a game with my Scions so far where I've not scored at least 50 or 60 points. So that's always good. Even if you lose, if you can get over 56 points, that's like a good sort of moral victory, good threshold. But yeah, overall, where did our team come? So because we technically hadn't lost any of our pairings, because we got 2 ties and then we got a win on the last one, what that meant was because all 4 of us won our games on that last one, which is really sort of good way for the team to end the day. That meant we ended up coming 3rd out of 6 teams, which is pretty solid. Can't complain about that. Everyone on our team got at least 1 win. 3, most of us got a positive win-loss ratio overall. So that was really good. Really enjoyed doing the team format. Highly recommend it, especially if you go to like your first tournament, you're not sure. Doing a team format is great because your captain can try and make sure you get good favourable matchups. Or at the very least, you've got people around you who you can commiserate with if things go badly. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. What am I going to do next with the Scions? Not entirely sure, to be honest. I've got London Grand Tournament coming up, but I've looked at the terrain for that. Certainly does not favour my Scions. It's a bit of a planet bowling ball situation. So, yeah, I might end up taking something a bit crazy, but I'm going to be doing a video on that later in the week. If you've got any questions from this event, from this video, or how any of my games went, or whatnot, any questions about Scions and running them competitively, any comments at all, put them down in the comment section below. I'll be keeping an eye on the comments, and I'll be replying to as many of them as I can throughout the week. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. thank you for watching. I want to say, before I sign off, a huge thank you to all the Patreon supporters for this channel. It is thanks to my Patreon supporters that I'm able to go to so many events, that I've gone to, 4 or 5 events in the last couple of months. It's thanks to my generous support from my fantastic Patreon supporters that I'm able to do that. Without it, I'd be lucky if I was able to go to 1 a quarter kind of thing. So really, really appreciate all the support from the Patreons. You guys are legendary. Without further ado, we'll end that one there. Thank you for watching, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.